Okay, looks like we're recording. Thank you, Brian. And did you want to re-vote for the minutes?
We've already had the vote, but I
Okay.
think we could just state on the record. I believe it was McKay that made the motion, and Cole, I believe you seconded it, and all were in favor. That's my recollection.
Agreed. Perfect. And we do have a quorum, so now we'll move on to the annual training from Tony Patterson, Assistant Attorney General.
Thank you. Just as a reminder or refresher or maybe new information for individuals that have not had this training before, it is required by Utah law to be held annually for all public bodies. So this is something that is conducted for all public bodies throughout the state of Utah. And just for clarification, that is a statutorily defined term. And the UR board, as well as the PT committee, falls within the definition of a public body. This year, I'm going to walk through this mandatory training step by step. If there are questions that come up, if they're brief, feel free to ask them. If not, feel free to submit a written question to Brian, and I'd be happy to spend a little bit more time on some of those questions. So first of all, what is required for a public body to meet? There must be a notice provided at least 24 hours before. It must contain the date, the time, the place, the agenda for the meeting. That agenda must be adequately specific so that individuals of the public would reasonably understand what is going to be the nature of the business that is going to be conducted by the public body. That notice then must be published on the Utah Public Notice website and then also offered to a newspaper and local media. It should be kept in mind that if an item that is brought up during a meeting by a member of the public or by a member of the committee can be addressed from the standpoint, it may be discussed, it may be fleshed out the issue. However, a vote may not be taken upon that. A vote may only be taken after there has been notice given. And so typically those issues are handled by noting what the topic is and then placed on a later agenda, addressed and voted on by the committee at that point in time. Now, all of the meetings must be recorded, and I appreciate Brian making sure that the meeting was being recorded. There also has to be written meetings. The recording of the meeting must be posted on the Utah Public website 3 business days before or within 3 business days of the meeting. The draft minutes must be published on the same website within 30 days. And then the final minutes must be posted within 3 days of approval. That, of course, includes all material that is provided at the public meeting that is disseminated. It includes summaries of public comments that are provided or other written comments that are provided. And as of note, it should be remembered that when the committee packet is sent out to the committee members, that is something for the committee to prepare itself individually, to come to the meeting and to prepare to take positions, to ask questions, and to conduct the public's business. Because as we all know, that the reason for the Sunshine Law or the Open and Public Meetings Act in Utah is to ensure and guarantee to the public that the public business is in fact being conducted in public. Now, this brings up a common issue. There are individuals who during a public meeting have taken advantage of more recent developments in technology and have used various means of communication on electronic devices during a public meeting. I would like to remind the committee that to the great embarrassment of the Salt Lake City Board of Education, their public communication that was occurring during the meeting on a not so public format became light through a government records request, and then it was published. And of course, there were several news articles several news pieces on television, etc., that quite embarrassed most of the members of the committee. That's an unfortunate thing. So that's just a reminder that during the meetings, communication between committee members need to be held verbally. It needs to be held where the recording can in fact pick it up. However, communications between committee members should not be engaged in during a public meeting. Now, some individuals feel, well, it's on my private device, no one's going to find out about that. I just would recall to everyone's mind the extensive investigation that occurred with the former Utah State Attorney General, Mark Shurtleff, who was accused of influence peddling. As a result of that investigation that was being conducted by two different county attorneys, his personal phones, his family personal phones, computers, tablets were all seized as part of the investigation. Just as a reminder, he was acquitted. All charges were dropped by both federal and state agencies. After a complete investigation, they determined that they did not have sufficient evidence to prevail, so those were dismissed. Of course, the message for us today is that any communication on any state public matter, whether it be on a state device or a personal device, it could become subject to a grandma request. It could become public, and any of those communications, of course, could be discovered. Now, the reason why that is so important is that there are some things that when we are communicating one with another do not seem like it would be that problematic. However, upon calm reflection and, of course, the media's interpretation of what was actually stated in those communications, those can be changed and viewed extremely differently. And that's, of course, when individuals are embarrassed by something that they didn't quite mean a certain way, but it was taken out of context. So the safe route is make sure that your communication about the public meeting is conducted, in fact, in the public meeting. Now, as far as a public meeting, that does not include chance meeting by committee members out in the community. However, a line could be crossed if there was lobbying efforts or efforts to persuade an individual to change their vote. So I would, again, encourage the committee to ensure the discussions occur in front of the board. Now, having covered those more important topics, well, I guess there is one more I did want to add. It is important to remember that that packet that is sent to the board is not sent out to the public. It later will become a public record. Before it does become public, it is for the consumption of the committee members only. And that, of course, is to ensure fairness for all individuals that wish to comment and to participate in a particular discussion so that they all are working off of the exact same information and no one is disadvantaged by perhaps not having a connection where they're not receiving documentation that perhaps some other member of the public would be having. So the Open and Public Meeting Act is an effort to ensure that the public knows what is happening in its own public affairs. And of course, if it is violated, typically what will happen, what will happen is the courts will set aside that decision and the committee would have to go through the entire process again. That is the cure that the courts have imposed upon public bodies that do not comply with the Open and Public Meetings Act. So having said that, yes, the potential for a violation of the act is a criminal offense. I'm not aware of anyone that has been prosecuted in Utah for that. However, I'm aware of several public bodies that have had to redo their business because the Open and Public Meeting Act was violated. So with that, I will conclude the training for this particular year, unless there are any specific questions that maybe someone would like to ask. And I will not be offended if there's no questions. Okay, I hear none. So I will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you for that review. Very important. And we'll move on to our next item, nomination and election of committee chair for the next year, I believe.
So yeah, it's that time has come. So I'll conduct this portion of it. Cole, you've done great, and we appreciate your service. And if you're nominated again, I don't have a problem with that. But any committee member is eligible to be the chair. I would note that McKay Robinson has let me know that he will be stepping down from his position on the committee. So want to take the opportunity to thank him for his service, and maybe also let everyone know that his hat is not in the ring for chair. But at this time, I welcome any nominations for any committee member to be the chair.
Paul, what are your thoughts on continuing?
I'm happy to do so, but I would also very gladly step aside if someone else wanted to take on the role of chair. So if there's any interest from the committee, you will wholeheartedly get a second to that nomination if there's any interest.
I'm not hearing excitement and people joining in, and I want to do it and haggling over the position. I'd like to nominate Cole Sloan to continue as committee chair. And is there anyone that would second that motion?
Yeah, if he's willing to do it, I'll second.
Okay.
I'll accept the nomination, and if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer those.
And all in favor of Cole continuing in this position, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, Cole, you will continue as our chair. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the DUR board update from Dr. Nguyen.
Good morning. So the DUR board has met in June to review the teplizumab, and the board also met in July to review the sickle cell disease. And in August, the board has reviewed Hemgenix and approved the Hemgenix PA. This is now available on the website for the pharmacy team. And in September, which is last week, the board has met and reviewed insulin pump to be considered to move it under pharmacy benefit. This is in the planning. We will update if any change to that. And next month in October, the board will meet again to review a second part of the sickle cell disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is a review of insulin pumps from Dr. Heath.
Thank you. Good morning. Let me just pull up my slides. All right. Let me know if you can't see the slide, but Good morning again. Today I will be discussing ambulatory insulin pumps with continuous subcutaneous insulin delivery. Continuous subcutaneous infusion of rapid-acting insulin or insulin pump therapy is a treatment for type 1 diabetes or other types of insulin-deficient diabetes requiring intensive insulin therapy. Compared to multiple daily injections of insulin, insulin pump therapy offers greater lifestyle flexibility and dosing precision. All insulin pumps reviewed in this report mimic the natural secretion of insulin between meals with continuous basal insulin infusion and offer the option to deliver additional insulin boluses. Each pump must be worn by the patient, with some pumps attaching directly to the patient's skin to deliver insulin. These are called tubeless or patch pumps. They are also disposed after each use. Other pumps are reusable and deliver insulin by long tubing called infusion sets. These pumps are called tubed pumps. Some pumps can be used as an advanced pump system when the pump is used together with a real-time continuous glucose monitor, abbreviated CGM, and a software algorithm. The software algorithm automates insulin delivery by the pump using CGM sensor glucose readings. This table categorizes and defines insulin pump systems and introduces the reviewed pumps based on their maximal level of automation in the rightmost column. 9 commercially available insulin pumps are addressed, including one pump, the t:slim X2, which can be used with 2 different algorithms, basal IQ or control IQ. Conventional insulin pumps are standalone insulin pumps which deliver a set basal insulin rate according to user programs and initiated settings. Conventional pumps may be used with a standalone CGM as a basic sensor augmented pump, abbreviated SAP. However, CGM readings do not automatically affect insulin delivery for these systems. Advanced pump systems, in contrast, include pumps that automatically pause insulin delivery when the CGM detects a low glucose value, called low glucose suspend or LGS, or when a low is predicted to occur soon, called predictive low glucose suspend or PLGS. SAPs with LGS or PLGS require the patient to still control all insulin, bolus doses, and basal rate adjustments. Automated insulin delivery or AID systems automatically determine basal insulin doses based on CGM sensor glucose readings, and advanced AID systems automatically determine basal insulin doses based on or without user input in addition to other functions of the AID systems. The iLet Bionic Pancreas is arguably the most automated advanced AID system, as it automatically delivers doses of mealtime insulin upon meal announcement by the patient. Note that even AID systems, our most automated systems, require the user to manage some aspects of insulin delivery. Most pumps are tubed pumps, except for the 3 Omnipod pumps and the Vigo. Except for the MiniMed pumps that use MiniMed Guardian CGMs, pumps usable as advanced pump systems are compatible with the Dexcom G6 CGM. A drawback of the Guardian 3 CGM, which is compatible with MiniMed 630G and 770G, is that it requires users to calibrate sensor readings with a blood glucose reading multiple times a day, unlike the Guardian 4 or the Dexcom G6, which do not require daily calibrations. The Dexcom G6 is currently preferred on the Utah Medicaid preferred drug list. The population approved for use varies by pump and sometimes depends on if the pump is used as an AID system, as shown in the right column. All pumps except for the MiniMed 770G and 780G are indicated generally for people with diabetes or people with diabetes requiring insulin. Omnipod pumps are not indicated for a specific age, whereas the Vigo is only indicated for adults, and other pumps are indicated for children or adults according to the ages shown in this table. AID systems are indicated specifically for people with type 1 diabetes. Among the AID systems, the MiniMed 770G and Omnipod 5 are indicated for the youngest minimum age of 2 years. AID systems t:slim with Control IQ and the iLet Bionic Pancreas are indicated for ages 6 or older, and the MiniMed 780G is indicated for ages 7 or older. This table compares some characteristics of pumps maximally capable as a conventional insulin pump or basic SAP. The Vigo is a simple mechanical pump, which is available in 3 different preset basal rates. In contrast, the Omnipod pumps allow the user to program different basal insulin delivery rates throughout the day. Omnipod pumps hold more insulin than the Vigo and are replaced less frequently. Omnipod pumps are also compatible with more rapid-acting insulin formulations and allow use with some ultra-rapid-acting insulins. In addition, Omnipod pumps have a built-in bolus insulin dose calculator, unlike the Vigo. Note that other pumps besides the iLet Bionic Pancreas can be used as a conventional insulin pump that run user-programmed insulin doses if they're run in manual mode. This table compares pumps maximally capable as a SAP with LGS or PLGS, including the MiniMed 630G and t:slim with Basal IQ algorithm. Both are tubed pumps that allow the user to set multiple basal delivery settings throughout the day and deliver user-selected bolus doses. The MiniMed 630G only performs low glucose suspend, whereas t:slim with Basal IQ performs both LGS and PLGS. However, with the MiniMed 630G, the threshold for stopping insulin is customizable with up to 8 different thresholds able to be set throughout the day, and both pumps automatically restart insulin after a period of suspension. Both pumps require that the user control insulin doses primarily using the pump. However, the MiniMed 630G with the MiniMed 630G, patients can deliver a bolus using a paired glucose meter without touching the pump. And similarly, a remote bolus is possible with the t:slim pump if the user has a compatible smartphone. Patients can also view data from the t:slim X2 pump on a compatible smartphone, unlike with the MiniMed 630G. Note that MiniMed 8 system pumps are also uniquely able to function as a SAP with LGS and PLGS without running the automated insulin doses, unlike other 8 systems. This table compares some characteristics of the 8 systems, which offer various unique characteristics. The automated dosing algorithm of the MiniMed 770G is the least flexible. Basal insulin is dosed to target the sensor glucose value of 120 milligrams per deciliter. In contrast, the Omnipod 5, MiniMed 780G, and iLet Bionic Pancreas allow the user to choose from 3 or more different targets. And the t:slim with Control IQ targets a range between 112 and 160 milligrams per deciliter. The Omnipod 5 allows up to 8 different target glucose points throughout the day, and the MiniMed 780G allows setting the lowest target value of 100 milligrams per deciliter. Most 8 systems also allow the user to temporarily switch to a different target glucose value for exercise or for sleep, and the iLet Bionic Pancreas does not have an exercise-specific mode. All 8 systems automatically adjust basal insulin doses about every 5 minutes. Advanced 8 systems, including the MiniMed 780G, t:slim with Control IQ, and iLet Bionic Pancreas, also deliver automatic hyperglycemic correction boluses. The Control IQ will deliver 1 correction bolus per hour, whereas the 780G and the iLet Bionic Pancreas may deliver up to 12 boluses per hour. Pumps other than the iLet Bionic Pancreas require the patient to manually deliver meal boluses per calculator suggested doses. Sometimes usual automated insulin delivery can be interrupted, such as if a connection with the CGM is lost. When this happens, most pumps switch to a limited automation mode. The Control IQ will switch to manual mode running a user-programmed basal insulin rate. Although the iLet Bionic Pancreas does have a limited automation mode, it can only run that mode for 48 to 72 hours, and after that period, the user must switch to another option for insulin delivery. Except for Omnipod pumps, all 8 systems are FDA approved as alternate controller-enabled pumps, meaning that in the future, they could theoretically be used with another controller dosing algorithm. While the Omnipod 5 is the only tubeless 8 system, the MiniMed 770G and 780G are compatible with an extended duration infusion set, that lasts about 7 days instead of 2 to 3 days for conventional tubing sets. So we reviewed recent diabetes technology focus guidelines from the American Diabetes Association, or ADA, International Society of Pediatric and Adolescent Diabetes, or ISPAD, and American Association of Clinical Endocrinology, or AACE, and we also considered recent expert consensus guidance on the use of aid systems. Overall, technology guidelines encourage individualizing selection of an insulin pump based on the patient's preferences or needs. Notably, no guideline distinguished between aid systems and advanced aid systems in their recommendations. The ADA encourages payers to provide continued access to the patient's usual insulin pump despite changes in insurance coverage. Clinical trials among people with type 1 diabetes have demonstrated improved time in range by about 10 to 15% with aid systems as a group compared to other insulin pump systems. Thus, for most children and adults with type 1 diabetes, guidelines from the ADA, AACE, and ISPAD prefer aid systems to other modes of insulin pumps. Per expert guidance, aid systems are an option for very young children under 7 years of age, although some youth with very low daily insulin needs may not be able to use some aid systems due to the system's minimal insulin requirements. All other non-aid pumps are an alternative for patients with type 1 diabetes who prefer those options to an aid system or who cannot use an aid system. For youth unable to use an aid system, ISPAD specifically prefers a SAP capable of PLGS over LGS. Among people with insulin deficient diabetes other than type 1 diabetes, there is limited evidence to support using an aid system. Based on low-level or expert opinion evidence, the ADI and expert guidance statement recommend aid systems as an option for people with insulin-deficient diabetes. It is unclear to what extent AACE and ISPAD recommendations apply to people with type or without type 1 diabetes. Possibly the AAC recommends aid systems for patients without type 1 diabetes with characteristics that might benefit from an aid system, such as significant glycemic variability. All non-aid systems are also options for patients without type 1 diabetes. Based on high-quality evidence, conventional insulin pumps are recommended for people with type 2 diabetes who require multiple daily insulin injections. And SAPs with LGS or PLGS are considered options for patients with significant hypoglycemia problems per the AACE. We searched for randomized controlled trial evidence directly comparing insulin pumps or advanced pump system software to one another for the management of people with diabetes. We also considered studies of the MiniMed 670G, which is a previous pump addition since it uses a similar algorithm to the MiniMed 770G. We did not find any head-to-head RCTs for most pumps as shown on this slide. We included 3 RCTs, which are all among people with type 1 diabetes who were not pregnant. An open-label crossover RCT compared the MiniMed 670 aid system to the MiniMed 780G advanced aid system, which delivers automatic correction boluses unlike the 670G. Both pumps were used for 12 weeks among 113 patients 14 to 29 years old with type 1 diabetes. The MiniMed 780G was superior for daytime duration spent in the hyperglycemic range and non-inferior for time in the hypoglycemic range compared to the 670G. Time in range improved to a greater degree when using the 780G versus the 670G, and patients were able to maintain the automated mode for a greater proportion of time with the 780G than the 670G. And the safety profile of both pumps was similar during the trial. A 13-week parallel group trial randomized 109 patients 14 years or older with type 1 diabetes to continue the t:slim aid system with Control-IQ or switch to a non-aid mode with Basal-IQ, which functions as a SAP with LGS and PLGS. All patients had recently completed a previous trial while in the Control-IQ arm. Patients who continued the Control-IQ spent a significantly greater amount of time in range compared to those who switched to the Basal-IQ. While hypoglycemic outcomes were similar in each arm, patients using the control IQ demonstrated superior hyperglycemic outcomes. The safety profile of the T-Slim when used with the control IQ and basal IQ was similar, except that patients using the basal IQ exhibited worsening glycemic control. The third trial was a crossover RCT among 103 patients 6 to 72 years old with type 1 diabetes. Patients spent 3 weeks using a SAP with LGS and PLGS, the T-Slim X2 with basal IQ, and 3 weeks using only a basic SAP, the T-Slim X2 with a standalone CGM. With basal IQ, hypoglycemic events were significantly reduced compared to the basic SAP period. Time and range was also slightly improved for the basal IQ period compared to the basic SAP period. Regarding safety, one severe hypoglycemic event occurred during the basic SAP period compared to none in the basal IQ period. All insulin pumps carry a risk of hypo or hyperglycemia and associated sequelae due to hardware or software failures and/or due to user error. Each pump also carries a risk of infection, skin irritation, or other reaction at the insulin pump placement site or insulin infusion or CGM sensor sites. Because frequent small doses of fast-acting insulin is used by the pumps, ketosis or diabetic ketoacidosis can develop relatively quickly if insulin delivery is interrupted. Some insulin delivery features can be attributed, can be attributed to an occluded insulin infusion set or the presence of air bubbles in the tubing. There is limited comparative evidence, but tubeless pumps may carry a lower risk of blocked insulin delivery compared to tube pumps. Compared to conventional insulin pumps, advanced pump systems offer comparatively greater safety features that mitigate hypoglycemia. Nonetheless, likely due to greater complexity, advanced insulin pump systems carry comparatively more precautions or warnings for use. The simple V-Go pump carries the fewest warnings of all reviewed pumps. This slide highlights some contraindications or limitations of the insulin pumps, and you can refer to each product's user guide or Section 8 of the report for additional details. There are no formal contraindications for use of the V-Go or iLet Bionic Pancreas. Pumps other than the V-Go are contraindicated or should not be used among people who are unwilling or unable to maintain contact with their healthcare provider or who are unable to see or hear pump alarms or signals. Warnings for most pumps advise that patients should be willing and able to self-monitor blood glucose. MiniMed pumps using the Guardian 3 sensor are specifically contraindicated in people unwilling to self-monitor blood glucose at least 4 times daily. As Omnipod pumps are tubeless and placed directly on the patient's skin, Omnipod pumps are not recommended for use by people with an acrylic allergy or who are sensitive to adhesives. All aid systems carry warnings or precautions regarding lack of data in pregnancy. In particular, the Omnipod 5, iLet Bionic Pancreas, and T-Slim X2 with Control IQ or Basal IQ are specifically not recommended for use during pregnancy. Additionally, aid systems other than the iLet Bionic Pancreas carry warnings or precautions for a minimum or maximum total daily insulin dose or weight to safely use the automated dosing technology as shown in this table. In addition to a minimum and maximum daily insulin limit, T-Slim with Control IQ should be used by patients weighing between 25 and 140 kilograms. So if it is desired to make recommendations for placement on the PDL, the P&T committee may consider recommending one or both of the options listed on this slide. First, you may consider recommending that at least one insulin pump other than the V-Go be PDL preferred. While aid systems are more effective than other modes of insulin pump therapy in people with type 1 diabetes, there is limited evidence for use of aid systems among people without type 1 diabetes. Utah Medicaid may prefer on the PDL most any pump usable as a conventional pump or SAP to meet the needs of patients with insulin-deficient diabetes, while allowing patients to access non-preferred pumps by prior authorization and/or by including a preferred aid system for patients with type 1 diabetes on the PDL per recommendation 2. The V-Go is the only insulin pump that has several limitations to its use compared to other insulin pumps, including the inability to customize insulin delivery rates, indication for adults only, and evidence for its use being limited to patients with type 2 diabetes. The second recommendation for consideration is recommending that at least one insulin pump capable of being used as an aid system be preferred on the PDL for patients with type 1 diabetes. Aid systems are preferred to other pumps for children and adults with type 1 diabetes and guidelines. There is a lack of comparative evidence between commercial aid systems. Insulin pumps and pump system characteristics vary, and some patients may require certain pump characteristics for safe and effective use. If the decision is made to prefer certain pumps on the Utah Medicaid PDL, Utah Medicaid could accommodate reasonable requests for a non-preferred pump via a prior authorization request. All right, I know that was a long one. Thank you for your time and attention. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you for that comprehensive review. Very informative. And if anyone has any questions, we can do that now. We do have a public comment. I have Michelle Torrey on the agenda. Michelle, if you're available, and we limit public comments to 3 minutes. That's just a reminder.
Thank you. Am I able to share? I have a few slides for you.
Yeah, and I have those ready if you'd like me to present, or you can present. Either way is fine.
You go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead and you can start your presentation.
Yeah, go ahead. So thank you very much for having me. And just so that you guys know, I'm the West Medicaid Account Manager for Insulet Corporation, manufacturer of the Omnipod. You can go ahead to the next one. The Omnipod portfolio of products is growing and offers products for both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Omnipod DASH was launched in 2018 and serves as a platform for all Omnipod products. Omnipod 5 was launched in 2022 and remains the world's first and only tubeless on-body automated insulin delivery system. Most recently, Omnipod Go received FDA clearance and is the first basal-only pod, and is currently in limited release. I did want to also make a note that our Aero system that you guys were looking at is phasing out at the end of the year. So this will be the portfolio here that you see on the screen. I also did want to mention that Omnipod does have ACE designation. The pod is the delivery. Can you go ahead to the next slide, Brian? The pod is the delivery component and the foundation of the Omnipod system. Each pod provides a continuous delivery of small amounts or microdoses of rapid-acting insulin. The controlled release of insulin mimics the normal function of the pancreas, minimizing peaks in absorption-related variability. The pod inserts the cannula automatically, which eliminates the need for the user to ever see or handle the insertion needle. This helps with insertion consistency and maximum site rotation. Brian, if you slide over that, I'm sorry, can you go back? If you slide over the video, there's a video there with that pod right there. If you could play that, yeah. This is an animation of the automatic cannula insertion. The guider needle inserts the cannula at 1/200th of a second and then retracts back into the pod, leaving the cannula in place underneath the skin, which is also shown in slow motion here. And next slide, Brian. This is a review of the Omnipod 5 automated insulin delivery system. The algorithm works by delivering insulin in microdoses every 5 minutes in response to real-time glucose concentrations. The system increases, decreases, or pauses insulin to drive the glucose to the target. The dose is determined by using both the glucose and the insulin history, as well as the glucose predicted into the future. The unique feature of the Omnipod 5 bolus calculation is that it not only uses the value of the glucose, but also the trend arrow to determine the dose. In this example, during the post-meal hyperglycemia, the system reacted by automatically delivering a series of larger microdoses every 5 minutes to correct the glucose back towards the target value. Next slide, sorry. As you may be aware, in January 2018, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services issued guidance clarifying that products such as Omnipod insulin management system fit into
And that's about the 3-minute mark there. Thank you very much.
All right. Can I just say one more thing so that the committee knows that the Omnipod systems are available on the Change Healthcare Diabetes Supply Package.
Thank you very much. All right, and now we'll open it up for committee discussion. And if there are any questions for our presenters, we can ask those now.
Hey, Brian, do we know, is there a, and I should have checked this, but do we have a do we have the automated CGMP monitors? Like, do we have a preferred one through Medicaid?
We on the CGM, we prefer the
Yes.
Dexcom 6 and Dexcom 7. And that was actually a question that I had for Lauren, was about it. It looked like it was just the Dexcom 6 for most of the pumps that were compatible, with the exception of MiniMed and a couple of them. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. My understanding is that companies that currently have a product compatible with the G6 are currently working to try and become compatible with the G7. But as far as I know, that hasn't been released yet for any of them.
Okay. Do you know if any of the pumps are working to have compatibility with the Freestyle Libre or any other CGM products?
I'm not sure about that. I'd have to look into it.
Okay. But currently there aren't any.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I think we are at a stage here. A lot of information. It looks like a lot of moving parts there as to see different products being phased out there. So it's definitely a consideration we'll want to keep in mind as we're kind of shaping our motions or recommendations here. BK, were you? I couldn't tell.
No, I'm sorry. I'm like flying through the document here. Lauren and the team did such a great job. Like, I mean, this is an incredible amount of information, and it's so helpful. And so I've just been trying to make sure whatever we do is matching with the CGM, because I think my experience in this area has been the people that have compatible systems and then get the education on the other side of things in order to make it happen end up really it's a life changer for them, especially with kids and things. And so you know, an aid system, I really liked the second recommendation with the aid system being a part of the recommendation, and if we can have that also be compatible with the CGM, I think that's kind of like the holy grail for me. But Brian, can we link recommendations like that, you know, that kind of make sure that are families talking between, you know, mom's talking to dad and that they're both on the same page, or how
I don't think that's unreasonable to, I mean, and I think as we've seen in the presentation, I think that there's a lot of data to support that approach. And so I do think that's reasonable. And I think there's a couple things that we're, you know, when we're evaluating something in P&T, there's one is, are we going to consider adding a PDL class to the PDL, because we currently don't have pumps? And then what are we going to do with that class? Are we going to recommend just something is preferred, or do we want certain parameters around what we prefer?
So these are currently done through the medical benefit. Is that what you're saying?
That's the current process. Is it's through the medical process, and it's the medical team that handles those prior authorizations. And so, you know, the purpose of this meeting is the division is taking under consideration whether or not to move that to the pharmacy benefit, with potential consideration for having the pharmacy team manage prior authorizations and management on the preferred drug list.
I kind of think that's the way everyone else is going. You know, and from a community pharmacy standpoint, it seems like we're getting thrown into this more and more lately, with almost everyone moving into the pharmacy benefit. So there must be an advantage to that.
Well, and when that happens, are the claims going through the pharmacy point of sale system, or are they still, is the pharmacy billing through HCPCS?
It's point of sale.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, we do have things managed on the PDL that do go through medical billing, but I think it's good to know how claims are being billed and what the art of the possible is for coverage and policy.
Yeah, and I would say about, as of, maybe 6 to 8 months ago, there was, I would say about 50% have switched over to, and that's an estimate. It's a guess, but it seems like, I mean, it's become a big thing that we manage in the retail space now. I guess I don't feel comfortable putting a number to it, but I mean, I guess the first motion would be to add insulin pumps as a class that can be considered for the PDL. I mean, I guess that would be my first motion. Is that how you want it to be said, or what's the best way to word that?
I think that's reasonable, and I would second that motion.
Perfect. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? And any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, McKay. And there was a note in the chat about that. Brian, thanks for acknowledging that.
And for those on the phone, I'll go ahead and say it out loud, those that can't see the chat. Michelle Torrey said there currently no access to Omnipod in Utah due to pharmacy designation by CMS. And I assume that's Utah Medicaid, not Utah more broadly. And yeah, Michelle said yes, that's correct.
Great. And then sort of looking at that first, recommend at least one insulin pump be preferred on the PDL. Should we just say like indicated for type 1 diabetes treatment? Does that address the Vigo portion of that?
Well, I think Lauren had recommended two possible approaches. One is the simpler is just at least one preferred other than Vigo, and the alternative was a little more specific. I've got the slide in front of me. It says the second option was recommend that at least one insulin pump maximally capable of being used as an aid system be PDL preferred for patients with type 1 diabetes.
And Cole, I just wanted to clarify, the Vigo is, the indication is general adults with diabetes, but my understanding is the evidence for its use is in type 2 diabetes, and so that tends to be the area where it's used.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and your slides, the expert consensus there, that was great. In the document there.
Would it be helpful to other committee members to have that slide on the screen of the recommendations from the DRRC?
I think so.
Lauren,
Yeah.
would you like to present that?
Sure. One moment.
So can we use the second recommendation but take off type 1 diabetes?
So just recommend that at least one insulin pump capable of being used as an aid system be PDL preferred.
With having and add a compatibility with the CGM component to it.
Sure.
At least one of them being compatible with the CGM. You know what I mean? So you could still add a second one if you wanted to, for a type 2 diabetic that doesn't have a compatible CGM or whatever, you know. But just having, I just don't want to make, I want to make sure that we have the, you know, if we say at least one pump that has the aid system and is or compatible with CGM.
Let me see if I can capture that in a way that works, fits what you're meaning. So
Because if we add two qualifiers, then it's, do we have to have both the qualifiers or just one of them? That's where it gets a little tricky.
let me try this. What if we recommend that at least one insulin pump capable of being used as an aid system and or being compatible with a CGM product be preferred on the PDL? Would that capture it?
I think so.
All right. And is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that motion. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And any abstentions? All right, the motion carries.
And I assume, Brian, that you guys will keep an eye on, I mean, we're talking technology and we're talking, you know, like this field, I feel like in the last 5 years has changed significantly, both from a monitoring and a administering standpoint, and with all the different rapid and ultra rapid insulins and things. I think it would just, I assume you guys are going to keep your eye on it, and we can bring it up to anything that, I just want to make sure that our recommendations are not narrow-minded to where we're going to limit ourselves. And I don't think we are, but I guess just putting it out there saying, hey, let's keep that in mind.
Right. Well, and from ongoing standpoint, we do review every drug on every PDL and every PDL class every year internally.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Mhm.
Excellent. Yeah, and this is working in the emergency department. It's been absolutely wild to see the progression and how patients will be telling, "Hey, I'm about to get hypoglycemic." It's just, that's been really cool to see that develop and continue. It looks like it's continuing to add some really life-changing aspects to folks' care. So that's great to see. I feel like that motion that we just put together sort of encapsulates the recommendations, and I'm not. I didn't feel the need to separate adult and pediatrics there. I don't. If anyone feels differently, please speak up.
Oh, Susan has something to say.
I, as I usually do, would like to add a grandfathering clause
Yeah.
that allows continuation of access to patients who are already using a particular insulin pump, regardless of which one is on the preferred drug list, eventually.
I'll second that motion.
So can I just, I'm sorry, can I just say one thing though? Is there, what if they're using something that's not.
Are you thinking of something that's old and outdated?
Yeah, and especially because the biggest thing with me for this situation is the cost barrier to starting something new. I mean, there's some education, but the cost barrier is significant, which with Medicaid is not going to be as significant of an issue. And I've seen a lot of people struggle through this with older stuff. So I wonder. I'm definitely, usually this is like a slam dunk of a recommendation that we always think about. And so I just wanted to bring that up. Is there any concern with that before we jump in? I guess having the option to do it is what we're looking for, right?
Correct. And
Yeah.
if the provider would, rather choose something newer,
Sure.
either they can choose the one that will be one or two that will be on the preferred drug list, or they can use a prior authorization if they want to customize it to a different one that is newer but is not on the preferred drug list, or if they're using one that is one of the ones that we were discussing currently and does not end up on the preferred drug list. I don't want them to have to change systems if they don't need to. Was sort of my, thinking around that.
Sure.
Well, and I think one thing to take into consideration too is that in all likelihood, there will be a class level prior authorization, or that's not carved in stone, but that would be my expectation. And certainly that, if someone has been using a product, that could be taken into consideration, taking into consideration, if someone is comfortable with using a product, knows how to use it, and maybe has difficulty learning to use another one, and taking into account, is this an older product? Have there been advances, and would it make sense to change? And all of those things can be taken into consideration with a prior authorization.
And is there a certain amount of look back we should be looking? I agree with the grandfather clause. If you get used to using company A's app and that works for you, and that's where your data is stored, to me, it makes sense to not necessarily change ecosystems on a whim. So I definitely agree with the grandfather clause there. Do we have a certain look back there? I guess, would it be like, would a 90-day look back be sufficient there, or for a grandfather clause?
Well, and it's kind of hard because depending on the product, if it's one that you've got a tubed pump and you've had the pump for years and the only thing you're changing out is tubes and cannulas and insulin, that's very different than something like a patch device where everything's changing every time. So if you've got a look back of 6 months, but they've got a 5-year-old pump, one, is it outdated? And two, is it going to be captured by that look back? And probably not.
So probably just the grandfather clause in general should be sufficient.
Agreed. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Siegfried, for bringing that up.
So yeah, I guess we can vote on it now. Sorry, Cole.
Why don't we restate the motion just so that we've got clarity on what exactly the motion is that we're voting on? And Susan, could you just restate that for clarity?
I propose that we allow continuation of access to patients who are already using a particular insulin pump, that they do not need to change based on the Medicaid preferred drug list insulin pump.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? And any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. And barring any further discussion, I would make a motion to close the meeting unless there's any additional thoughts.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Brian. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. We'll see all of you except for McKay in November. And thanks, McKay, for all your hard work.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.